Hello and welcome to our public affairs program here at Catamount Radio. I'm Brian Collamore, your host for the 1 hour program each Sunday, and we call the show Catamount Community Connection. You're probably well aware of that by now. And we talk with community leaders from the business, professional, nonprofit, and sometimes political arenas. Our program brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has brought you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland since 1846. And we are already looking forward to what will be the 179th fair coming up in August of 2025. We've had this guy on, I think, a couple of times in the past. Devon Neary is going to join us. He's the executive director of the Rutland Regional Planning Commission. And first of all, welcome in, Devon. It's great to see you again.
You as well, Brian. Thanks for having me, and
Sure.
Happy holidays to you.
Yeah, thanks. Same to you. We will be airing this just before Christmas. So it's we're recording this on the 18th, and it will air on the Sunday following that. And then I think I'm going to try to get the mayor in, because I'll be away and out of state for about a week after that. And I have to cover one of the Sundays when I'm gone. So here we are again, and we have, I would imagine, a whole host of things that we can talk about. I'll hand the football to you, and you can take the 100-yard dash, if you will, and pick what we're going to start talking about. But there is a lot of stuff that's on the plate.
Absolutely. Our portfolio just keeps growing. We'd love to see that slow down a bit, but hey, the needs are great, and we're here to respond to those. So let's start with some good news, and that is money. Bringing money to the region is one of our primary focuses. One of the most recent announcements that's very exciting, because ultimately it will help reduce tax burdens in communities, is the Municipal Energy Resilience Program. So for those who out there who are unfamiliar, another word salad with MERP, so that's the acronym, Municipal Energy Resilience Program. This was a state program using ARPA funding through the Department of Buildings and General Services to support energy efficiency, weatherization, heating, all the rest in town-owned buildings. So this was a statewide program. We had almost all our towns apply, but those towns with high energy burdens, which is defined as the amount the sort of typical person pays in energy costs in their community, and that's a metric that is created by Efficiency Vermont. Those high energy burden towns were given preference in the scoring for these awards. So in our region, we had 10 towns receive funding. Benson, Brandon Fire District, Chittenden, Fairhaven, Pulteney Town and Village, Middletown Springs. So all over the region, which is really exciting. And that brought in $3.1 million to weatherize and upgrade 16 buildings. Most of those are municipal buildings, but like I said, in Brandon, it's their fire district. So those awards went out just recently, and we'll be starting to get contractors together and agreements and all that stuff this upcoming year. So I think the towns have 2.5 years to spend this money, which will be difficult because we're not the only region. The real limiting factor here will be available contractors, because we're going to be competing against Addison and Bennington and all the rest to try to get those. We would like to try to employ as many local companies as possible. At the end of the day, the towns decide who will be doing the work and how. But this one's really exciting because, as you know, our municipal buildings are sometimes the oldest buildings in town. And because our towns are so fiscally responsible, they've gone without for a very long time. So if we can replace heating systems and windows and, add solar or heat pumps, whatever it may be, that's going to save money to the town and money to the taxpayer. So that one is really, really exciting.
So for the most part, I'm thinking of like town offices, maybe a town hall. and hopefully they'll be able to stay open while the repairs and renovations are going on.
Exactly, yeah.
I guess if they do it during the spring or summer, you don't have to worry about the heating system.
Exactly,
but that is kind of neat. Is there a particularly unusual or unique building that came on the list that they can tell us about, or is it pretty much always just a straight municipal-owned facility?
Yeah, most are pretty run-of-the-mill. However, the really exciting one is Middletown Springs. They want to, so Middletown Springs is going to be moving their library to the former Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. They've gone back and forth over potential bonding for a new library town office for years. They build a new town office. They were looking for the library space. The church opportunity arose. So not only did they receive this money, which is great, but they were one of only 2 libraries in our region to receive that state library money. So they got $1.2 million from the Library Association too, or the state library. So between that money and this money, that'll really upgrade that building tremendously. And what we're seeing now is these libraries are not just a place to go read books and take out books. This is the community center in a lot of places where there's events happening and things for children. So it's exciting. In a small town like Middletown Springs, this could be a really transformative project and bring the community together.
Yeah, I know from talking with Randall Smathers about the Rutland Public Library, the same is true, where people literally spend a lot of time in that building, certainly when the weather's bad, to get out of the elements, but also to be able to go online, be able to check a book out, or spend a kind of a quiet hour to maybe meet somebody and have a visit with them. So you're right. It's kind of like it's not like the general store used to be necessarily, but it sort of has that feeling for a lot of communities.
Absolutely, yeah, it really does. And speaking of general store, there's an exciting topic to talk about. Typically not, but the town of Benson received funding from this community trust initiative, which is a joint venture with VCRD and Preservation Trust of Vermont, which is looking to restore that village store in Benson that burned down 3 or 4 years ago. Another great example of a community that is really desperate for that central space that they can hang out in and get coffee. And, the stories I've heard from folks in town of how people used and behaved around that village store, it was the glue. So if this funding can bring it back together in a way that builds this trust that, it won't be dependent on one owner to do it, this will really be more of a co-op, which we have a very similar model in the region with Pierce's store in Shrewsbury. Very similar model, and it's proven to work. It's challenging because it really relies on a lot of volunteers and folks' time, but it pays off. So Benson's got some really cool stuff happening there as well.
Yeah, I had the opportunity actually to go to the, I don't say groundbreaking ceremony, but the open house kind of thing. They haven't obviously started constructing the building yet, but they had sort of a celebration of things that will be happening there. One of the interesting things for me was they saved the zip code, so the post office will actually be inside that general store again in Benson. It was a great day, and you could just sense the relief on people's minds too.
Yeah, especially hunting season. That was where you went in to go to weigh in a deer and, talk about your trials and tribulations out in the woods for the hunting season. So I'm excited for them. We're also working on a project with them right now through the Municipal Technical Assistance Program, MTAP, which was a political program you all supported to get as much of that ARPA money to small towns, especially rural towns, as possible. So Benson is one of the towns. We're working with them and engineers Dubois and King to create a concept and engineering plans for their town office. It's really a campus. They have the town office building, which is the old school, and then they have the town hall, which has tons of events, and they have a little playground out back. It's kind of janky now, and there's a lot of parts that don't really work for them. So this is going to try to envision a place that would have a pavilion and a meeting space. So you you think about this sort of communal third place that can have events like the Burdock Festival combined with a village store, and this could really be a big thing for a little town that, could really use it. So that's exciting.
I've marched in that Burdock Parade more than once in Benson, so
Yeah,
I know
it's a special thing.
It is.
It's a special thing.
A very neat community. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pleased to hear that there are still ARPA funds available. A lot of people might think, they're long since gone, everything's been spent, but that's not true, right?
That's not true. We're hearing statistics of as much as $300 million at the state level still unspent, and it is a ticking clock. So, the ARPA rules mandated that these funds need to be, committed and spent before the end of 2026. So, I think a lot of that money was reserved and earmarked for wastewater, water projects, those hard, big infrastructure pieces, and they're very slow out of the gate. And part of that is, these projects are complex and they're expensive. And, for a very small town with a tiny system, let's say like West Paulet, where there's about 140 users on the West Paulet wastewater system, how well positioned are they to manage a big, federal project like that, and all the rules being made around from A&R around, how to spend the money and all the permitting required and the engineering. So, the RPCs are really well positioned to understand directly what the needs are from towns and to get that money out to them. So, this legislative session, we're going to be asking some questions and hopefully working with you all, Brian, to figure out, hey, are we going to lose this if we don't use it? Because we can't afford to lose it, especially for these small towns and small or medium and big towns, too, that need upgrades to their wastewater system. I don't know if you saw the paper today, but Proctor's looking at a $5.5 million bond just to maintain their lagoons. That's not even expanding the system, simple maintenance projects. So if the needs are out there, we want to help get that money out. And, state are fantastic partners. The agencies are doing great work, but I always thought it was a bit of a catch-22. The agency responsible for making the rules is also responsible for dealing out the money. Okay. Yeah, the enforcement and the money, those probably shouldn't be hand in hand. So, I'm excited to try to find ways in which we can actually spend that money, because, any funding out there that we have, we got to be able to use and try to get out directly to those towns and not expect the smallest towns in the world to be able to manage them and get them spent within this super short timeline,
Well, they're federally mandated in terms of deadlines, so there may be a way for us to talk to our our federal delegation, the two senators and congresswomen, to get that to sort of, let's put the deadline out a little bit further kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you correctly put your finger on part of the problem is we just don't have the people to do the work either,
right?
Especially the contractors. They are just so busy and so committed that there's really no way to get it all done in the time frame that's been outlined, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree with you. In Rutland County, we're super limited. We have some really dedicated contractors, but we only have a few. So that's going to be critical, whether we have to pull in folks from New York and New Hampshire and Massachusetts to get it done, so be it, because we saw that pretty successfully done recently with this broadband build out. I mean, the entire county of Rutland was built out in 6 months almost because we had so much outside contractor come in laying lines. And I think the next step now is actually connecting to those homes. But, it shows that if you have the money and you have the capacity, you can do a lot, pretty quickly. Yep. So it's exciting.
There probably will be at least some of us who feel also that there needs to be a little bit more attention paid to permitting situations where we could at least expedite the process a little bit more quickly and get permits in place I'm constantly being asked by developers, to be fair, to try to help with, especially the Act 250 process. We've got now a Tier 1 situation with the city, and we'll talk maybe a little bit in a second here about the TIF district going up. Those are better positioned right now because they don't have to, I don't want to say get bogged down by Act 250 regulations, but it does take time and money and expense to get through the process. And I, for one, have always been a big proponent of making it as predictable and timely as we can make it.
Absolutely. The law's the law, but at the end of the day is how can you navigate it? And I think there's still so many question marks, and I think depending on who you get to, either at the Act 250 Commission or the NRB or, A&R, you could get a very different answer or a different application of that rule. So I agree with you, Brian. We got to streamline this. I think Act 250 reform through Act 181 last year is a start, but it is not the end-all, be-all by a long shot. I mean, it is exciting to see that it's playing out, at least in Rutland City. Two of recent jurisdictional opinions, one at the Berwick Hotel and one at Traverse Place, say that they don't need Act 250, and that will save, like you said, tens of thousands of dollars and up to a year in time, which, time is money. So I'm excited, for one, to see this. I am very nervous because, the RPC starting in January is going to be doing the mapping that will dictate or indicate those areas that will have Act 250 jurisdiction and won't. And that'll be a big, big effort. But our sort of flexibility within that rule is fairly narrow. I think we all could predict right now which towns will be a Tier 1A, a Tier 1B, and not. And there's not too many of them. So we need to look for opportunities to expand those areas wherever possible. And this effort will be starting in January to develop our regional future land use map. We expect to be meeting with every single town in the region so that they are comfortable and confident that we are accurately mapping their community within the confines of the rule. Obviously, we can't just throw anything against the wall, but that's something I see as a huge opportunity to get it right.
We're talking to Devon Neary, who is the chief executive officer of the, or executive director, I should say, of the Rutland Regional Planning Commission. So we talked a little bit about the $3.1 million that was awarded and the weatherization processes, which will start on some of the municipal buildings in the county. And it's too bad everybody couldn't get a piece of that. But, there are decisions to be made. And from what you're telling me, there will be a lot of better buildings when we all get done. Do we want to touch on the TIF yet, or do you want to bring something else back before we take our first break?
I guess let's go to TIF, sure. Yeah, because we can hit the hazard mitigation stuff after the break.
So we have 2 districts right now that have been approved. I don't think in exactly the same degree or to the same degree. I think Rutland City, well, maybe Killington is ahead. I can't remember who's further ahead in the process.
Sure. So Killington's fully established. They've been approved by VEPC, and they're moving forward. A lot of people have probably seen the work being done on the access road with taking out the steepness of the head wall on that turn and then starting to lay the water line, which that is ultimately the big one. Killington's forging ahead. They are doing great work up there. Rutland City, they are a little bit behind, but they passed one major milestone, which was the letter of intent from the Board of Aldermen. So I believe that was submitted. So that is one big milestone in their process. The next, they will need to put it before the voters. I believe that's going to happen actually in March.
Okay.
And then I think it will go to VEPC and they will have to approve it. And then the bonding will happen. So TIF in Rutland City seems like a real huge potential to spur some of this development and support it. The RPC has been working all along with the city to help develop some of these projects. So some of the big ones identified for the TIF district are obviously the Berwick Hotel, Center Street and Wales Street downtown, the Linda Lee Dress Factory, and more. So, with the Berwick Hotel and the Linda Lee Factory, we've spent, hundreds of thousands of dollars doing environmental assessment work because both those properties were contaminated with historic practices, which is not uncommon. Most of Rutland City has some level of contamination in those urban soils. So we were able to, access federal and state money so that we could do all that assessment work at no cost to the developer. So in Berwick, we're at the point where we're seeking cleanup funding with the developers, and hopefully going to be starting that cleanup sometime in the spring. So that is really, really exciting. That project is moving forward. In terms of Linda Lee, we're really at the conceptual phase before we sort of develop the CAP, which is the corrective action plan, the sort of final phase of environmental assessment. That it really requires some level of understanding of what is the future development going to be like? How do we sort of manipulate the site and treat the soils that are dirty underneath? So that's happening now. Both could be really huge projects and add quite a bit of housing too to the area. So, where the TIF will come in is reducing those development costs by the city taking on some of those bonds, and then the tax increment paying those bonds off over time. So, the city will have that upfront bond cost, but overall, they're going to have a much, much higher grand list at the end of the process when they're done paying off that bond. So in Rutland City, I think it will be really, really big for housing and for downtown revitalization.
One of the things that came up when we were up at Killington, it's probably a month ago now or so, was, I think, a request. I don't know whether it was a VEPSI person that was there or just someone from the select board, but there is a cap on the TIF districts right now, both in terms of the numbers that you can approve in a particular county and also statewide. And I see it as a really effective economic tool for a lot of communities to use. So I'm not quite sure why there's a cap on it. And we'll probably have discussions in the upcoming session that will either expand the cap or just do away with it, and allow municipalities to use the TIF district economic tool if they so choose, and if the community wants to do it too. But I think these two here, and I know St. Albans years ago had one, and it's working out very well up there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where else. Maybe did Barry get one too? I think
there's 6 or 8 throughout the state. A couple of them didn't end up using them. So Bennington didn't end up using theirs, so they closed theirs out. And another community didn't use it and closed it out. But, there's several out there. And really it's about how you use it is how successful it'll be. So I think if Killington's any indication, then it will be successful. I'm glad to hear you guys will be taking a look at that, because I know there are certain state folks that are not necessarily fans of this program, but it's, long-term gain is really what we're looking at with these programs. The other piece that I think would be worth looking at is the concept of project-based TIFs, that, you don't necessarily have to develop an entire district. Right. You can really support a singular project, which I think for our smaller communities is much more manageable.
Yeah, I call them mini TIFs, but I think
mini TIF.
It's the same
absolutely.
thing. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we will definitely, I say definitely, as far as I can tell, at least entertain the conversation. And you're right, there's both House members and senators that aren't big fans of this, but I don't know. I see it almost as a win-win if it's used properly. And you don't use it for every last project,
Right.
but for the ones that make some sense, I think it makes some sense. And certainly Kent Belden is part of the answer to me with what we've been left with as the pit for all these
Right.
years. And I can remember when the building burned. I was in my first stages of radio career, and I called the report into a Boston station that, the townhouse is burning down.
Wow.
And I watched
Wow.
people jump out of the building into the fireman's net. So,
It's incredible.
yeah, I was probably 21 or 22 years of age at the time. So, anyway, and it's been the pit since then.
Yeah,
and we've
over
tried,
50 years.
We've
Yeah.
tried so many times to fix it. And this looks like it's finally going to be something that we're going to have a Showplace Hotel downtown with rooms to rent on a nightly, just like a hotel does.
Yeah.
And also some permanent housing in other parts of it, too.
Yeah, 26 units of, several different size bedroom apartments that'll be really nice. And if we've heard anything lately, it's that downtown housing is really a huge need and a huge want. So it'll be exciting for you to potentially see this pit get filled in so many Rutlanders. I know there's skepticism out there, though. I've seen a lot of comments, on social media about, well, this is going to get filled with a voucher program. I can tell you right now, a hotel of this cost and magnitude cannot afford to run on vouchers. No. That is not what is going to be happening. No. What is going to be happening is people will finally have a place to stay downtown so they can spend their money here. This is a good thing. We want this. Go to a Paramount show, go out to dinner, hang out at the hotel after. It's a win-win.
Yeah. And there are large corporations. I'll mention the Casellas of the world and the Rutland Regional Medical Center, who are looking for places to house, upscale professional types here. And right now they're having trouble finding places. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, we're going to take our first break. Again, we're talking with Devon Neary, the executive officer of the executive director. I keep saying officer, executive director. You're the main guy at the Rutland Regional Planning Commission, and we will be back with more in just a moment here on Catamount Community Connection. We're back on Catamount Community Connection. Our guest this week is Devon Neary, the executive director of the Rutland Regional Planning Commission. And we've talked a little bit about TIF projects. Tax increment financing is what TIF stands for. We also talked about the $3.1 million to do some weatherization of municipal buildings throughout the county. And we kind of focused on Benson for a little bit, and that's great because it's a community that probably doesn't get as much publicity as some of the other larger ones in the area, but it's a great community, and I always enjoy going there. There's a great place to eat, by the way, in Benson.
One of the best pie in the state right
yes,
there.
Yes, indeed. So let's talk a little bit more. I know you've been working on a local hazardous planning project, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So local hazard mitigation plans are plans that communities prepare to lay out mitigation strategies for different hazards that they face, especially flooding. The FEMA, the federal agency responsible for emergency management, really makes a lot of great benefits for those communities that do this planning process. It reduces your ERAF rating, so the percentage you have to pay in a disaster. It also helps you be eligible for federal hazard mitigation grant money as well. So what's really exciting, we're working 4 towns right now. 25 of the 27 towns in the region currently have these plans, and we've prepared them for all those 25 towns. The 2 towns that hadn't had them before were Mount Tabor and Rutland City, surprisingly. So we're actually working with Rutland City right now on their first ever hazard mitigation plan, which is extremely exciting because not only will it reduce that ERAF rating, but make them eligible for the current round of hazard mitigation grant programs. So in terms of the actual planning itself, as much as useful as the plan is, the process is even more useful. And getting all the players together, we're working with DPW, the fire department, the police department, the mayor, planning and zoning, and all the sort of partners that go along with the city to really understand, what are the vulnerabilities in Rutland City and what are the best mitigation measures and adaptation measures to avoid, real severe damages and protect public good and public health, right? So this has been an exciting project so far. Rutland City has been a tremendous partner, and we've gotten a lot of good feedback from the community on this plan. More exciting is the timing couldn't have been better, because of the 2023 flooding, the federal government gave the state of Vermont $90 million to dole out in these hazard mitigation grants. Now, that $90 million, there was $400 million in requests for that money, so it's going quick. And this money is also used to do FEMA buyouts, so those properties that are routinely flooded, this program will buy those properties out so they can be demolished and not rebuilt there, and somebody can move somewhere else to safer, higher ground. So in Rutland City, we're working on a project right now around the fairgrounds and sort of a bigger culvert around Strong's Avenue. One of those culverts was pretty integral in the flooding that happened in August of 2023, when sort of Goucher Hill and Route 7 and Clover Street was all flooded. There was a choke point right there underneath that culvert. It's undersized. So this could sort of look at restoring some floodplain areas and upsizing that culvert. Excuse me. And what's really exciting is this funding comes with no match. So this would be a $0 cost to the city and create some upgrades to infrastructure that they desperately need. So in my opinion, it's a win-win. Other towns we're working with are Fairhaven, Rutland Town, and Middletown Springs for those hazard mitigation plans, and looking to do some projects for that hazard mitigation grant program in Pulteney and Shrewsbury as well. So, what we really see as, we got lucky, generally speaking, in 2023 and 2024, avoided a lot of the big calamity and damages that came around those disasters. But that luck will run out at some point, and we got to use this time to our advantage to try to prepare better. One thing the RPCs throughout the state are doing through our collective organization, VAPTA, the Vermont Association of Planning and Development Agencies, is looking at potentially applying to a PROTECT grant, which is a grant through the Federal Highway Department. And we're looking to try to do some modeling throughout the state of Vermont to better understand exactly where the issues are and identify and prioritize projects out of that list for upgrades and improvements. So if there's a culvert that's a choke point on some road somewhere, we can identify that for future funding and try to get it fixed up so that the town downstream isn't inundated, during a severe weather event. So a lot of good things happening in this arena. And, we're trying to use this time to town's advantage to do as much planning and preparation as possible, because we know there's another one coming. We just don't know when.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious if you just think about it that in a state where there are mountains and valleys, you're probably going to have some issues with water. Not so much wind, although that can happen from time to time,
sure
too.
Does.
In Florida, it's more of a wind event with hurricanes and not such. But, you've got a state like Vermont where the mountain is pretty much directly in the middle of the state. So you've got runoff to the west and runoff to the east. And then you add to that, and you could argue probably for a long time about all the causes that are making this happen. There is definitely a change in weather patterns, and some folks like to use climate change as the explanation for that. Others just say the weather's different than it used to be. But there's no doubt about that, I don't think, that most people can say in Vermont we've got shorter winters, it seems like. There are temperatures that are more moderate on both of the shoulders going in and coming out of the winter. And so you get a rain event that, we used to call it a 100-year event. Then it was a 50-year event. Now it seems like it's every 10 years that we have one that's just really powerful enough to cause massive disruptions. So if we do all this planning and then the weather starts changing the other way, it wouldn't bother me, because at least we've put ourselves in a good position for whenever it does happen again to at least deal with it. And part of it is culvert expansion and that kind of thing. But I think overall, it's just it's a wise thing to at least plan for it and think about it.
Absolutely, yeah, couldn't agree more.
So we're in a tough situation with, if you live down from where the water's running from. You're going to have an issue. And even if you're at the top, there is stuff that happens up at the top too, that, with mudslides and all that kind of stuff that we need to prepare for, because it seems to happen a lot more often than it used to.
It does. And I think Vermont's uniqueness exacerbates the issue in that we don't have county government, and we are expecting 251 individual towns to sort of do this in unison. And we know that watersheds don't care about political boundaries, right? If you're doing a great project on the headwater, but someone isn't doing it midstream, then the folks downstream are still going to be impacted. So, it's a hard thing to organize around. And I think part of the beauty of Vermont's uniqueness with such local control and town autonomy is so fantastic, but we also lose some efficiencies by not doing more planning and consideration on that watershed level. Like in Rutland County, we share watersheds with two other counties, Bennington and Addison, with the South Lake Champlain and the Otter Creek Basin. So, we work closely with our watershed planners from the state that do consider that more on the watershed level. But again, the application is really focused on the municipal. And I think we got to sort of like rethink the structure there, not permanently or, comprehensively, but just as it relates at least to hazard mitigation planning and mitigation projects. We are hearing that the state may allow, I think they're in conversations with FEMA about potentially future regional hazard mitigation plans again. That was something we did in the past and we sort of got away from it. I think it would be great. I think it would be really efficient to have one master plan for all the towns versus 27 individual ones. Those are great too. So we'll see. I think that's always a challenge in Vermont is dealing with 251 different municipalities to try to get them in line and together on a central vision and goal.
Yeah. One of the more unique and for me shining moments was right after Irene, which again surprised many of us because that was sort of like the first one that we all went, wow, that's not supposed to happen for a few more years. What happened? But I remember, I won't tell you who it was, but it's someone that's very familiar to most people in the county. And he was part of a company that is doing a lot of construction and a lot of wonderful things for the community. Maybe people can figure it out from that. But we had someone, I don't know if it was from FEMA, but it was, in my view, a fairly typical federal bureaucrat who showed up at the site of where Route 4 was really severely damaged with the water coming across it and undermining it. And you couldn't drive on Route 4 for a while, especially in Mendon, which is where this occurred. And this gentleman got out of his vehicle, and he's got a three-piece suit on and a clipboard.
Oh
and he says, I'd like to speak with who's ever in charge. And this person, who was definitely the local guy and in charge, said, that'd be me. He said, well, what's going on here? And he said, well, sir, it's pretty simple. You see all these rocks and all the dirt that's down here? Yes, that's right. Where we're going to take all of that and move it back to where it came from. That's what's going on here. Do you have any other questions? And the guy said no, and he got in his vehicle and left. I mean, that's a pretty funny example of how you need to have the local people figuring this all out, and not some other guy who will never come back again.
Oh, yeah.
But it was really, I couldn't stop laughing for a long time after.
Yeah, there are a lot of FEMA horror stories out there,
Yeah.
and the luck of the draw with who you get is super important.
And I don't mean to imply that all federal workers are.
Oh, God,
but
no.
This
There's
guy
great
was
ones
just
out
so full of himself and self-important, and he couldn't wait to ask the question. And he got a pretty, and the language that was used was a little bit more
Direct.
than I admit.
That's fair.
So we're talking to Devon Neary, who is the Executive Director of the Rutland Regional Planning Commission. We've touched on a number of different topics. I know there are other projects that you have coming up. Bring us up to date, if you like.
Yeah, well, one thing I'd love to circle back on, I've talked about the last several times I've been on here, is our 2026 Rutland Regional Plan update. Everyone's probably sick of hearing from me and seeing my emails and all our flyers, but I got to say, to start, a big thank you to everybody in the region that's participated in this process, provided their opinions. It is unbelievably helpful and valuable in drafting this plan and ensuring that it does reflect the priorities of the towns and the public. So that's been great. We just finished our second phase of public engagement where we reported back. We provided details on how we heard opinions from the first phase of engagement, and then how we incorporated those into our draft policies that we released to the public as well. So we just wrapped up a survey, again, hundreds of responses, super great participation, and it really indicated that, one, we're on the right track. You know, our policies generally are pretty in line with what people want to see. They are meeting the state planning goals, which is great. We have to check that box now. And we now feel like we have a really good working draft to push us through to the end of the project. So what we'll be doing next is completing our first full big draft that will be released to our Board of Commissioners in January. And we'll be starting to release those to the public as well in preparation for our final phase of engagement in mid-2025. Right now we're targeting June to get that final draft out to all the towns and the public for feedback. So our timeline is super protracted because some of the provisions in Act 181, now our plan has to be approved by the new LURB, that land use board, which adds another 75 days to our adoption timeline. So for a plan that we're hoping to adopt in April of 2026, we actually have to start our hearing process in September. So talk about a long adoption process. So that means we got to get it right now, and we have to have by June a really, really good draft that everyone feels good about. We have time built in there to make changes based on the feedback we get, but we're excited. We're getting close on this thing, and the end is in sight, which I think our staff are excited about. This is a multi-year plan and a lot of effort, which is what we're committed to doing. So that plan is coming along, and again, thank you to everybody who participated in that process. And look for more updates from us. If you're curious about where we are, want to see drafts of the plan or the policies, then we have a dedicated plan website, rutlandrpc.org/plan 2026.
Okay. And I did fill it out. I will be right up front. I took time to fill it out. And I did like Act 181 for the most part. There were provisions in it. We've talked about the TIF piece, which benefits Rutland City. There's no doubt about it. It removes a lot of the Act 250 burden from developing in the city. I was not in favor of some of the other provisions. Mm-hmm. You mentioned one. It seems like, for whatever reason, the legislature loves adding layers of bureaucracy to everything that we do. And to me, all that does is complicate things and slow the process down and make it more cumbersome for most people to get through. So I didn't like those, but it wasn't enough for me to not vote for it because the city really made out pretty well. But as we've talked about already in this show, more work is to be done. I still think there's a path forward to relax some of those regulations even more for other areas that aren't the designated downtowns and all those sorts of areas. Not everybody wants to live in a downtown area. People buy a piece of land somewhere. They want to be able to build a house on it or maybe a business. And I think there's got to be some consideration given for that. So this land use board or whatever you just referred to, excuse me, may be an example of, again, another layer that I don't know if it's necessary or not. It seems like if you just sit down with people and talk common sense to them, and come up with a plan, and then you ask other people, what do you think? And they say, yeah, either yes or no. That should be enough, and then go ahead and do it. Get it done.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brian, and I think a big misconception out there is that, once it's written in law, it's going to never change, and things are constantly tinkered with. I think we got to see how this works and then make adjustments as we go. But I do agree. I worry for smaller towns. There's a lot still to be seen and said on how the rules will be applied to Tier 2, Tier 3 areas and how that will impact housing and development, small businesses in those areas. But I am worried about that sort of rural equity piece and making sure that they have every opportunity that the big towns do, because they often are relying on grand lists. And if they're a bedroom community, then they need more bedrooms because costs are not going up. The one thing I will say, we are extremely sympathetic and sensitive to the fact that, the state has a lot of really big initiatives going, but it seems like more and more of those initiatives are sort of placed on the back of small towns who may have half of one person there working, paid to do that work. And, at some point, something's got to give. So trying to really figure out how can we reduce costs to those towns, but also give them more capacity, whether that's shared services, whatever it may be. We're trying to really look hard into that.
Yeah, and you're right about the legislature. We, again, all too often, in my view, pass something that we don't see the unintended consequences of, and then a couple years later, we say, "Oh my gosh, what did we do that for? That doesn't work. We got to undo that or amend it." That's our amend it. That makes it sound like it was, a good thing, and in reality, and I think we're going to see some examples of that. I think as soon as we convene, this clean heat standard is going to come out again, and it's not going to go through this time. I'm very confident that will be a dead issue. With the legislature. There may be other ways to accomplish what people want to do, but that certainly I don't think was well planned out, and I think we're going to bring that to a halt. So that's an example, I think, of something that, when we passed it, everybody jumped up and down and said, "Oh, this is the greatest," and in the end, it isn't. It really is not. Anyway, that's just my personal opinion. I share that, but
I think
and I think the election proved that too.
I was just going to say, I just read a New York Times article 2 days ago saying that Vermont, can't believe Vermont's in the New York Times, but it said we had the biggest change of any state in our state legislature, and to me, that's a mandate. That is saying folks universally aren't super happy with the direction, so they want to slow down and reassess, which is great.
No, I think you're right. We're going to see a big change in both chambers. The Senate went from, what was it before? It was 6, so it was 13 or 14 to 6, and then it was 7. We had 7 Republicans, and the remainder were Democrats or progressives. Now it's going to be a 17-13 split. And then in the House, they picked up, I think, the most seats. I think it was 18. They're going to start with about 56 versus whatever the remainder is from 150. So I think it's going to force people to talk together and figure out what the best way forward is. And to me, those are the best laws when you give and take a little bit and figure out what most people think is reasonable. But
absolutely.
We'll see. All right, so let's take another break now. I know we have a VLCT reference to, at least I took some notes on, and we'll come back with that. We're talking to Devon Neary, who's the Executive Director of the Rutland Regional Planning Commission, and we'll be back with Devon in just a moment here on Catamount Community Connection. We are back with Catamount Community Connection. I'm Brian Collamore, your host. Devon Neary is our guest this week, the Executive Director of the Rutland Regional Planning Commission. I should mention our show is brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has brought you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland since 1846. Looking forward to the 179th Fair coming up in August of 2025, and thank you to the Rutland County Ag Society for their sponsorship of this show. So I mentioned before we took the break about a VLCT proposal or program that might be coming up having to do with the select boards. Devon, what's going on with that?
Yeah, really excited about this one, Brian. It is a joint venture between VLCT, which is the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, and regional planning commissions around the state to start a program called simply select board meetups. And the idea is pretty simple in that we, one region per month moving around the state hosts a informal meetup that invites all select board members, including the chairs, village trustees, boards of aldermen, city councilors, to a central location. We're going to be hosting the first in the state on January 16th at the West Rutland Town Hall upstairs in the theater area. And the hope is that, one, it's just an opportunity for folks to rub elbows, get to know each other, share stories, information, resources, because as we just talked about, these select boards are just being tasked with more and more and more, and the opportunities to collaborate with even the town next door are really drying up. So the hope here is maybe by creating some space intentionally to encourage folks to talk with one another, share stories, that maybe there will be future sort of partnerships and efficiencies gained by creating this opportunity. The idea would also to be have some structured time to sort of focus in on one particular aspect of town governance, whether it's, bulk buying sand, for roads, or looking at energy costs or personnel or policy work, any of those things, a new regulation, a new law, and trying to demystify some of those things, be there to answer questions, and also, for a chance for VLCT and the RPCs to provide critical information directly to select boards. Because as much as we are transparent and as much as we share information, I feel like sometimes we're fire hosing the towns, and we're not the only ones. It's us, it's VLCT, it's the state of Vermont, it's all the agencies, and things get missed, and it's no one's fault. So maybe by creating some space and slowing things down, we can change that dynamic. VLCT is a huge partner for towns. They provide so many services, and they're really sort of like the flip side to the regional planning commissions. And together, we're really trying to reform our relationship with VLCT and trying to find these new opportunities. And, working with Ted Brady, who's the director over there, he's a yes guy. He's often looking for every opportunity to provide more to towns, to do more, to do better. And, at the end of the day, I don't think there's any bigger advocate for towns. And you know this, Brian, when we testify at the legislature, often it's Ted Brady and it's the folks from the RPCs that are really saying, wait a second, have you thought about this small town in the corner of Vermont and how this is going to impact them? So I'm excited about this one. I think that, I'm excited also that the first one will be in Rutland County, because, I think that shows a lot about what we are and who we are and our relationships. So more to come on this one. I'm kind of hoping, since we're the first one, there's only 11 regional planning commissions, maybe we'll get 2 this year, later on in the year as well. But again, that'll be January 16th for all those select board members listening to the show tonight. And we'll be actually sending out all the information on that tomorrow, Thursday. So the 19th. This is coming out, the 22nd?
Yeah, we're recording this on the 18th. It's always hard to put yourself ahead by
exactly
3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
Well, we only have a couple minutes left. I want to thank you for coming in again.
Thank you, Brian.
We will have some changes, I think, in terms of policies coming up. We'll see. I don't know. We had a lot of turnover in the Rutland County legislative delegation, and a lot of the faces that were here last session won't be here coming back. But we got some new people with new ideas, and hopefully they will be able to coalesce. I'll just mention, in my view, and I did get elected chair of the delegation, so I'm in charge of the other 17 members. Affordability was the number one issue, I think, in the election. There's no doubt about that, especially with respect to the property tax situation and the educational costs. So we're going to have to deal with that. Housing, big issue. And with that, sort of as a subset, the Act 250 reform, at least the potential to build more housing to take some of the pressure off. Public safety is still a big issue as well. We still hear, unfortunately, we had a legislative court day this past week, and we still hear some horror stories about people who are frequent flyers, as they say, who come back to court. And we're going to try to find some thoughtful ways to give our judicial and our state's attorneys some new tools to work with, hopefully. And healthcare is another huge, we haven't talked at all about that, but we've had recent meetings with the Rutland Regional Medical Center and some of the other health providers throughout the state. And there is a crisis, a absolute honest crisis going on with costs for healthcare, and the Green Mountain Care Board's decisions to, in many ways, I feel, unfairly limit the growth of certainly RRMC. You know, they're asking them to cut back on their revenue and still serve patients the way they have been. And I think the two are impossible to go together. So we've got to come up with a better solution for a number of issues. But I think we're ready to roll our sleeves up and at least go to work this coming session. And there'll be new chairs and new committee assignments, and nobody knows where they're going yet. The Speaker will be deciding that in the next couple of weeks for the House members and the so-called Committee on Committees, which is a kind of a weird term. 3 people, Lieutenant Governor, the pro tem, and a member elected at large, make up our side of the thing in the Senate, and they will make the assignments for committee assignments and also chairs of those committees. So more to come on that. We will meet, by the way, every Wednesday. If people are listening and they want to sit down with the legislative delegation, you will have to drive to Montpelier to do it. We meet at the State House every Wednesday morning at 8 for an hour. You can come in and just listen if you want, or you can come in and offer questions and maybe some solutions to help us out as well. And that is every Wednesday, beginning with the first Wednesday that we're in session. I don't know if we'll do the first week, but the second week from there on in. So, love to have you come back at some point, Devon. And again, thank you for joining us on Catamount Community Connection. And hopefully we'll see you again soon.
You bet, Brian. Thank you so much. And thank you for your leadership, especially with that Rutland delegation. We are lucky to have you all. And,
it's my pleasure, and they're all a great bunch of people, and I'm sure we'll have some good times along the way, too. It isn't all super serious sometimes, and it shouldn't be. You should be able to be having fun with it.
There's good times in that cafeteria.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we will see all of you next week here on Catamount Community Connection.